Mother, man.
This is Tasos from The Bleeding, and you're listening to Murder Metal Mayhem. Horns up.
Spreading faster than a case of the clap in a trailer court. Able to shatter eardrums within a 666-mile radius. A podcast more brutal than all the rest. It's Murder Metal Mayhem! This is Pete Altieri with the Murder Metal Mayhem podcast, and I've got the privilege of doing this interview with Tasos, the crushing UK death thrash band, The Bleeding. He's the guitar player. I appreciate you taking the time out to do this with me today. And what's the weather like over there in London today?
Hey, Pete. Thanks for having us today. Sure. Well, it's really good, actually.
Wow! I was waiting for you to tell me it's raining, because that's what I always hear about London. No?
Yeah, things have changed. It's quite hot actually for London standards today. So yeah, good weather.
All right. Well, it's hot here too in the United States. I'm about 3 hours south of Chicago, so in the middle of the U.S. And so very cool. All right. Well, why don't I mentioned that you're the guitar player? You're the founding member of the band. How long you been playing guitar for, Tasos?
A long time. About 30 years, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm a founding member of the band. I think I'm probably, you could call me the founder of The Bleeding, but yeah, a founding member I feel more comfortable with.
Right. That's cool. Yeah, that's awesome. I always love to talk to the different guys playing in the bands that I like to listen to. And I mentioned to you, and I posted a review of the Monokrator album, which I absolutely love. It's easily in my top 5 metal albums of the year. And I was wondering, because I didn't really spend a lot of time looking this up because I wanted to ask you, is Monokrator an actual word, or did you guys make that up? And does it kind of tie into a concept for the album?
Yeah, it's actually a real word. It's a Greek word that means soul emperor, or emperor of emperors, or you can replace emperor with ruler. So it's someone who is above everyone else, essentially.
Wow. I had a feeling it was a real word, but I wanted to ask you, and I'm looking at the album cover. I took a guess when I did the review of what that meant. So I hope I wasn't too far off, thinking it was somebody in a throne, ruling over a legion of dead people or the dead. So
yep,
definitely love that album cover. And how did you guys end up recording that? Because nowadays things are so much different than they used to be. Back when I started playing in the 80s, obviously going digital or analog, and then saw the digital stuff coming in, and now everybody's recording from home. How did you guys do it?
Well, where do I start? So the previous album, Morbid Prophecy, we did quite a long session that ran across a few days at the studio. And the problem with that is sometimes when you're running within a specific time frame, certain things you might not be happy about afterwards, especially when it comes to the vocals. So this time around, we tracked the vocals over at Jamie's place. So he recorded his own vocals, essentially, sometimes with me as a producer. For the guitars, essentially the production of the guitars, we used real amplifiers. We used a Polish amp that's called Mr. Hector. That sounds really, really nasty. And we tried a few different ones. The previous album we recorded with a JCM 900 boosted with Metal Zone. But this one, it was that Mr. Hector amp, which is a cross between, I'd say, dual rectifier and probably 5150. And that worked really well. Jordan, he also tracked quite a lot of his parts at home, just in order to keep that sort of. Um, we wanted to remove the pressure uh, part of that equation. And I think it worked out quite well. But I have a feeling that for the next thing, whenever that is going to come out, we're going to go for something very raw. That's my feeling. We're going to go like I think we've reached a point where we've achieved a really nice polished sound, and we all come from that sort of mentality. Like if you grew up in the early 90s and you had all of these bands as your reference, you were going for that. You want to get that polished sound. It's part of your kind of like your objectives. But
Right.
I think that we kind of like we're quite happy with that, with a Monokrator and how it sounds. So I think maybe for the next thing we're going to try something that sounds a little bit more raw and unprocessed.
Yeah, I would agree. The album sounds absolutely unbelievable, but I hear what you're saying though, wanting to capture that raw. I mean, to as a listener to that album, I would have never known that you guys recorded that way. I would have thought you were in a studio, classic, everybody's together. So you pulled it off brilliantly. I mean, it really turned out good.
Yeah, I
Definitely.
mean, many of these songs came out through rehearsals and trying stuff out as a band. So I think that kind of helped quite a bit in making those songs sound the way they do.
Yeah, definitely. And the album has a title track. Is there a theme of that Monocrator theme throughout, or is it just for that song?
I'd say it's just for the title track. Um, but the general theme is that kind of like domination. We knew that this album is going to be our best, meanest, fastest, heaviest effort to date. So that sort of theme loosely reflects that sort of uh, offer, if you will.
Right, right. That makes sense. Now, I mentioned how much I like the artwork. Who did that cover for you, and has he or she done other covers for you?
No, is he's quite well known in the scene. His last name is Castellano, is it? Jose or something along those lines. It starts with a J. But he's extremely talented and he's done
Yeah,
work with a lot of bands in the scene.
that's awesome. Yeah, the album cover really looks great. It was when I saw you had a shirt with the album art on it. I'm like, oh yeah, that's my shirt. And you had them in the big U.S. sizes, which I loved. So
Cool.
sometimes I get pissed. I see all these great shirts, and the biggest size they've got is like large, and I'm like, okay, that's not going to work. So I know when I was playing here in the U.S., you had to get the 2 and 3X size shirts, or you weren't going to be able to. You aren't going to be able to sell smalls and mediums in the Midwest in the United States. That's for sure.
Well, quite a lot of our fans really are going for that sort of size. And at first, we weren't getting, when we would print our own T-shirts, eventually we'd start ordering quite a lot of triple extra larges, because our fans demand them. By the way, I've looked up the guy's name is Juanjo Castellano. I just wanted to get that right.
Oh, sure.
And he's an excellent artist. Apparently, he's just been commissioned to do work for some big American death metal bands. I think maybe our front cover made an impact and drew the attention of quite a lot of people. I hope that because
Yeah.
he's really worth it.
Is he Italian? Is that
He's Spanish.
Spanish? Okay. Very cool. Very cool. Now, I really love the video you did for Chainsaw Death Cult. I mean, it turned out really good, and it incorporates the artwork in it. But how did you guys put that one together? Did you do it yourself, or did you have somebody do it?
No, we hired some animator guy from Italy. Actually, our label knew this person, and they hired him for us. Yeah, he's good. He's good. Unfortunately, I don't remember that name, but that turned out well. And actually, we did something clever. We started a video with actual uh, footage of Jordan playing the bass
Right.
in the intro. That kind of like that was a bit of a risk. We thought it might not blend well with the animation, but I think it worked out quite well.
No, it worked out great. And as a bass player, that caught my attention. So I was like, oh, that's cool, little bass intro there. And his
Great.
tone is so nasty on that album too. So definitely think it mixes well with everything else. Now, what about the songwriting process? I always love to hear how bands do it. Everyone does it totally different than the others, but what is
Hmm.
that process like for you guys?
Um, I am the main songwriter in the band. So what I'd like to do is when I have an idea, I pursue it and I keep working on it in a way that it develops into something. If that the result of that initial process is something that I think is worth doing, then I present to the band. And after that, we work on it as a band. I might, essentially, I write the music, but our vocalist Jamie writes most of the lyrics and the vocal lines. And I've got to say that without him, the songs would sound a lot more old school death metal. But because of the fact that he's such a thrasher, um, in his DNA, it comes through in his songwriting. So he manages to change those uh, purely, pure death metal riffs into something that sounds a lot thrashier. And I think that gives us our our own edge, our own character. Um, yeah, and certain songs like on Wings of Tribulation, we had to jam quite a bit in the studio in order to get the right feel, the right flow. Um, I think the strongest point of the bleeding is the songwriting at the moment, at least. I think we've worked quite hard to be able to fine tune our um, art and our workflow and our understanding of what it is that matters for our music and focus on that and improve on that. Um, it's not easy to, the easiest thing you can do is start, messing with ideas and turn your music into a supermarket of ideas and things. It's
Right.
actually really hard to find the one thing that works for you. And I think with the new album, this is the first time we've had that sort of consistency, and we want to maintain that. When you death thrash, it's easy to go from, to have a really wide range, and I think that's not good. I think as a band, you need to have a very good and strong and focused vision in terms of what your musical objectives are. And I think the most successful bands they do that really well, but it's not easy.
No, it's not. And it's interesting you say that about Jamie's vocal style because I was trying to put my finger on what was it that gave me a thrash kind of feel because I definitely that's my roots is in thrash. I eventually got into death metal and I like them both equally now, but that makes sense that's where that's coming from. The way he's
Hmm.
attacking the songs are more thrashy than death metal. But like you said, man, you guys have a very unique way of doing it, and I think it's impressive. Yeah, because
Cheers.
I like the other albums too, but you can see a distinct progression from one to the next. It's like the Monokrator album was like inevitable. Eventually, you guys
Hmm.
got there, but man, you got it now. That's for sure. Now, when I first heard about this, your band, okay, because I get, tons and tons of, like we all do on social media, all the different things I subscribe to and so forth. I hear about a lot of bands, and that's how I heard about you. And the name was like, okay, I Googled it. And I always like to go to Encyclopedia Metallum kind of to start to see, okay, where are these guys from? How long have they been a band, that sort of thing, look up the different albums and so forth. And when I Googled you guys, the first thing that popped up was the Five Finger Death Punch song. And I was like, okay, now I've heard this band, so I know damn well it's not that. But I laughed to myself because I knew my co-hosts would get a kick out of it. So when I brought you guys up for the first time on the show, one of the guys says, yeah, but there's the Cannibal Corpse album, The Bleeding. I'm like, I know. I said, but it was just funny that the first thing that I saw was Five Finger Death Punch, but I knew damn well it was not that. But I have to ask, just to be sure, was the name inspired by Five Finger Death Punch? What did Five Finger Death Punch write a song about you guys? Is that where it comes from?
I'll be honest with you. We have absolutely nothing in common with these clowns.
No, they're awful,
but
dude. They're awful.
But it is unfortunate that when you search for us, that's the first thing that pops up. I would say it's my personal goal to see through this so that next time you search for us, we pop up as a first.
Yeah, they're
thing that
U.S.,
comes
so
up.
I can't even poke fun at them being a UK band or anything. That the Five Finger Death Punch is all U.S., unfortunately. So
Yeah, I know.
yeah, I just thought it was funny. Now, I see that you guys are on Redefining Darkness. I love a lot of their releases. That's maybe how I found out about you guys, but how have things gone with the label?
Yeah, Thomas, the owner of the label, is a great guy. He has been really helpful in terms of guiding us through the release and throughout our collaboration. He has a very good understanding of how things work. And it is always great to work with people who have an idea. Like, one could claim that you don't necessarily need a label in this day and age. But I would argue that the more people you collaborate with and the more people you have who are supporting your music, who are behind you, the more chances you have to be heard and seen by, a bigger audience. And that's the whole point behind being with a bigger label. I think um, it is an educational process for all of us, working with new people, working with new labels. You get to compare how you did things in the past, and you can see what works, and keep learning essentially. So it's really cool. We're really happy with Redefining Darkness.
That's awesome. Where are they based out of?
I think they're based out of Ohio,
Oh,
somewhere in
okay.
Ohio.
Interesting. Okay, that's not too far from me. I didn't know if they were US or not. I just know I bought a few different releases from them, and every time they have new stuff coming out, they let me know. And that may be how I found out about you, but yeah, definitely dig what those guys are doing over there. That seems more extreme bands are going independent, like you were just saying, and I agree with what your thoughts were about getting out to a bigger audience. I mean, all bands, of course. I mean, if that's not your goal, I'm not really sure what you're doing it for, right? I mean, you want to get out to as many people as possible, but I do know that there are a lot of the bands that I interview that are really indie bands. They're doing it totally on their own. And as a musician, I've done it both ways and definitely could see the benefit of having the label. But in a couple of instances in my career, we got burned really bad by a label. So that would definitely be the bad side of it, is that you could get really messed up. I've heard plenty of times where labels, screw a band over and now they can't release anything and they're kind of stuck, and that's awful too. So I'm glad that it's worked out well for you guys.
Yeah.
Because I firsthand I've seen it where the album never came out, can't release it anywhere else. Now what do you do? Especially in an era where the only way to do it was in a studio, and we didn't have the money to go re-record it or write and re-record another album, so we were really stuck. Now, I love to
I've heard of these horror stories myself, and you need to watch out for these things, but you also need to have a bit of faith when you run into someone, because without that, you're just going to be just, within your own fort, protecting your IP and not doing much. So I think it's, at some point you need to take that leap of faith and start trusting people, and hopefully you'll be lucky enough to keep going.
Yeah, I agree. And I think too, Tasos, any young guys listening, young musicians, make sure you read what you're signing. If you don't understand it, take it to an attorney and have them tell it. I mean, I know that it sucks and bands don't have very much money, but boy, you could get burned real bad if you don't read what you're signing or don't understand what you're signing. I think bands could get taken advantage of.
Yeah, that's one thing. And also, if I may add an additional thing here, the worst thing that can happen actually is when you go with a label, and that's happened to a few bands I know, and they do nothing for you. They just put out the album.
Right.
And they do absolutely nothing to back up the release, to push stuff out, to do any PR, because that's really what you need the label for, to push out the release for you, to have contacts in the press, to get people to hear the album. And in many cases, our bands have known signed with much bigger labels, but because of the fact that the band wasn't huge, they didn't really make an effort to push it. So they just put the album out and they let it die off, basically.
Yeah, that is true, and that happens. I know a band I used to be in were label mates with the Goo Goo Dolls before they became big, and you could see the label pushing, resources to the band that was kind of drawing the attention. We also had an all-female band on the label, which was getting a lot of that focus and attention away from what we thought should have been us, But of course, all bands want that attention, so it's a vicious circle, that's for sure. Now, I always love to ask bands or people I interview this question because I learn about so many awesome bands this way. But are you listening to any bands right now, or have been listening to some bands that maybe our listeners aren't familiar with, whether they be UK bands or anywhere in the world? Any bands you've been digging that you want to mention?
That's a good question, and I wish I had prepared for that, because I do have some favorite bands at the moment. Let me think.
Well, I'll tell you one that I've been listening to since I interviewed them in Australia. They've got an amazing death thrash scene over there, and the band In Malice's Wake are from Melbourne, Australia, and they're absolutely unbelievable. But death thrash, really good. I think you would probably dig them based on what you guys sound like. But that's a really good band, and there's just so many great ones. Canadian, so many great Canadian bands I've been listening to. Immortal Possession, just some really good ones out there if you kind of dig a little bit.
Sure. A couple of bands that I can think of right now. One of them is actually on our label, Redefining Darkness. It's called Maul, Maul. Seraphic Punishment is the album. That
Okay.
thing is brutal. It's amazing. It's old school death metal.
Nice.
It could have come out in 91 easily. It sounds
At
really cool.
a Morris Sound Studios there in Florida.
Yeah, no, it's not quite. It doesn't have that Scott Burns type of sound, but it's a lot darker. But I would say it sounds kind of like early Incantation.
Oh, nice.
Um, Another band that I really like. So I gotta say that I'm really into punk and hardcore music. And there's an American band called AC/DC, actually, just like the other band, but it's actually Antichrist Demon Core, the name.
Oh, okay.
Um, and they've had an album in 2020 called Satan is King that blew my mind. Um, so I would say these off the top of my head. I wish I had prepared for that because I've got loads of albums I buy every month, and when when someone asks me and I'm not prepared, all of a sudden my mind goes blank. But thankfully, I thought about a couple.
That's all right. Well, if you think of any more before we part ways, you could share.
Also, Hellripper. Hellripper is our friend, and
Hell Ripper. I think I've heard of
Hellripper,
them.
and the new album is really awesome. It's a one-man band essentially, but the music is excellent, and we're talking about someone who's really talented and really intelligent. So at the moment, he's doing really well, and it just was announced that Hellripper is going to be on tour with Abath
Oh, cool.
uh, this autumn. Warlocks, Grim, and Withered Hags is a new album.
Okay. I'll have to check that out for sure. Now, any plans for touring that you guys have? Any plans for the big shows, maybe? Anything you want to mention?
Not at the moment, I'm afraid. We've ran into a few problems. Our bassist had an accident. He had a cycling accident. He fell on his shoulder and broke it.
Oh,
So he's recovering from that. So we couldn't commit to anything. We're still hoping that he's going to be okay in a few weeks' time. And we've had some issues with our drum. So we've been trying to resolve these things at the moment, I'm afraid. But for anyone listening, if any promoters would like to invite us to any events, any shows, by all means, get in touch. We've got a huge fan base in America, a huge fan base in Germany and other European countries. So yeah, give us a shout.
that's awesome. Yeah, that's sorry to hear about the injury, but like you said, hopefully you get on the mend and get back in the saddle again. Now, here's another kind of off the wall question I got for you. If you had, and I ask all bands this question, if you had to pick just one person to die in a mosh pit at one of your shows, would it be A, Ivan Moody, B, David Draymond, or C, Machine Gun Kelly?
I don't want to wish death to anyone because
I
I've
know.
studied the black arts, and doing that is actually throwing a curse at someone. And unless you're really prepared for that and you've done your homework, you shouldn't do that. But
Well, let's just say
some of
beat
these,
up, a little beat up,
uh,
but they're okay. They're going to pull
yeah,
through.
that last guy you mentioned, he's quite annoying, I have to say.
Yeah, I think if I had to pick, I would go with him. I usually mix up the A, B, and C. Justin Bieber's been there before. Kim Kardashian's been in there. I remember I did an interview with Schizophrenia, the band. Those guys are amazing. And their singer said, "Do I have to just pick one? Can it be all of them?" So it's a lot of fun with that question.
Yeah.
Now, what's the plan moving forward for the Bleeding? Anything? I mean, you got the new album. When did that come out?
Came out early June, I
Oh,
believe.
okay. I thought it had been out a little bit before I heard it. So I may have heard it right when it came out then. Okay. That's cool.
Um, so yeah, traditionally you don't want to put anything out too soon after the release. You want to let it play out and run its course. Um, we might do an EP next. We're thinking about that. And the reason we want to do an EP is we want to experiment with a couple of ideas, nothing too far out, but anything that could help us expand our sound in a way that helps us become even better. An EP is a good platform for that.
Yeah.
Also, when it comes to recording techniques, like I said earlier, it's a good way of trying things out. Yeah, EPs are tricky though. Some people don't even consider them as part of the main discography of a band. I see, quite a lot of videos on YouTube where people present bands' discographies and they talk about the albums and they miss out. And they don't mention EPs. I go, hang on a minute, that EP is
Yeah.
legendary. How can you skip that?
Right.
And that's unfortunate. People see EPs a little bit as something disposable, something in between albums that doesn't have a lot of value. But in many cases, EPs can be good. So that's the main reason I'm thinking, is an EP a good idea? Should we hold on to whatever we have as songs and write a few more and make a new album? So not sure yet, but I would say thinking about an EP at the moment.
Okay. That's cool. Um, Definitely encourage anybody that's listening to this to go to your website, deatheternal.com. I'll link to it in the episode description. I mentioned I got all your releases digitally, purchased them, bought a shirt. Everybody listening, you got to support these bands because that's the only way the underground bands can survive. But any other merch or websites you wanted to mention, Tasos? Anything that I didn't touch on?
Yeah, our main Bandcamp is where you can get all our current merch.
Love
Just
Bandcamp.
yeah, we are very excited to release some patches, Morbid Prophecy patches. They're really high quality ones. Sometime middle of September, they should be available on our Bandcamp.
Okay.
We want to do some new T-shirts as well. We've got um, all sizes available as well. I think for the current design, some of them are out, but I think people would be able to find quite a few things on there.
That's great. Yeah, Bandcamp is a good way to support. So I'll link to both of those in the episode description for anybody
Yeah.
that's
Also, since we're talking about that, let me just make a quick note about Monokrator, the vinyl edition. That's been
okay.
delayed from the record plant. Unfortunately, it's been happening all over the place,
I've heard of it.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and our album has been affected by that. Unfortunately, we're hoping that soon it will be available. So people, when order now, they should consider that as a pre-order. Um, but I have the test presses, and I've got to say that the vinyl master we've done sounds phenomenal. It just sounds perfect for the medium. It's really well balanced. And actually, I was thinking, I wish I had that same mastering on CD potentially. It would have been a little bit lighter on the low end, but I like the tightness of it. So I would say, by all means, this is a high quality vinyl release. Please bear with us, though.
Yeah, and that artwork at that size would be really amazing too, for sure. Very cool. Well, Tasos, appreciate you doing this interview with me here on Murder Metal Mayhem. And if you guys ever have any new stuff coming out or you want to touch base, you know how to get a hold of me. And I always like to close out the interview with a track from the album that I might think is a standout. The whole album rips, but this is one that I thought I would share for the listeners, the title track, Monokrator. So we're going to close out this interview with that and subject all of our Murder Metal Mayhem listeners to the bleeding. So thanks again, Tasos, horns high from the U.S., and we'll talk to you soon, my friend.
Thank you so much for having us. Thanks, Pete. Speak to you soon.
Mother, man.